Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in today's video we're going to look at a couple of sun shelters from the company ADesign. Now when it comes to sitting and baking in the sun, I want absolutely no part of that. I don't care if it's outside of my backyard or I'm at the beach, out having a day excursion, it doesn't matter. At this point in my life, I hate sunburns, I don't like baking in the sun, and I always need shelter. And that's exactly where this comes into play. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at a couple of these shelters in a couple of different scenarios. I have a couple of different colors here to show you the example, and then I've set these shelters up in a couple of different ways. Pretty much for the most part, this is a very flexible and versatile sun shelter system. It also is really good at blocking the wind. So depending on what you're trying to do, this may come into play. So again, when we come back, we're going to look at this in a couple of different scenarios. First, for the backyard barbecue cooking scenario, I got this set up. Show you how this is to get this unboxed, set up in the backyard environment. And then we're going to go to the beach, turn the corner, grab one of the other colorways, and show you what it's like and how I used it in my particular situation, just knock down those sun's rays. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at ADesign who did provide these for review. And so here you can see getting the ADesign sun shelter into good use. Now this was a very hot day, coming close to about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so getting this shelter set up was definitely key. And the setup of this, very simple. Now for this backyard test, you can see I am using the color Periwinkle. There are a number of different colors, very nice. I do like this Periwinkle color. It actually kind of matches my house, which is great. But setup, very simple. The first thing I like about the ADesign shelter, it is actually fairly flexible in the number of different ways you can set it up. Now ADesign definitely has some ideas in mind, and it does come with 4 poles and 8 sandbags. In addition to the sandbags, it also comes with stakes. So here, using it in the grass, you'll see I put the sandbags aside and I did leverage the stakes. But at the same time, you still sort of need to use the same tie-outs that do come with the sandbags. So getting this all stretched out, the first thing you'll notice, this is a nice large shelter. ADesign stating that this is approximately 10 feet by 10 feet of shelter. Now I can say it depends a little bit on the sun angle, how much effective area you're going to get out of it, but for the most part, a very nice large shelter. Setup takes a little bit just to get used to it. You kind of need to take your time, figure it out as a one-person setup. Now, it's very straightforward. It's just a little bit cumbersome where you'll notice it does take a little bit to figure out how far you need to stretch each one of the cords, how tight they need to be, and how much area the actual shelter itself does take up. The setup of the shelter is definitely larger than the 10 by 10 area that you get the actual benefit of the shelter in the shade. So what you'll see here is it does take up a little bit more area where I really stretch out the cords as far as they can, figure out kind of what my overall layout's going to be, and then I can work towards getting the poles in place. Now this is actually at this point very simple, very straightforward. Just simply taking the poles, inserting them below the shelter. There are some bungee cords that this comes with that helps you out, and it is actually pretty easy once you get this thing laid out the right way. So setup, not difficult at all. It just takes a little bit of getting used to it. And you can see here, very effective. Now, one thing worth considering, this shelter itself is not incredibly tall. You'll notice here, as I get the bungees into place and get everything cinched down, I can get the poles nice and vertical, but the vertical height still just about 6 feet, a little bit less than 6 feet. So for me, I need to duck down just a little bit to get underneath it. And you'll notice this is at the exact extremes. So these poles are installed at the exact extremes on the corners. You can set this up pretty much any way you want. I chose to get the maximum sort of distance on this shelter and get the poles all the way to the edge. You can go in a couple feet. It doesn't make too big of a deal. You'll notice this stretches out nicely and becomes very, very flat. Now, I did want to run a little bit of a test. So actually, the best thing for me was taking my thermometer and getting it placed underneath the shelter. And you'll see in a little bit, I kind of figured out how much temperature drop I had overall. Now, as you look here, basically pacing off the distance of the shelter from one end to the other end, you'll notice here that I ended up with about 15 feet. And from one side to the other side, well, equally good. I ended up getting myself roughly ballpark around 12 feet. Now, the actual setup, and I'm talking about bigger than the actual shade itself, is really closer to approximately 18 feet in one direction. And then as I mark this off in the other direction, you'll see here, this is about 21 feet. So again, as I mentioned, in the direct sun, well over 100 degrees. This is pushing close to about 110 in the direct sunlight. And as you take a look, I just kind of scooted up to my second floor to look down. You can see a good amount of shade beneath. So as you look at the actual temperature beneath the shader, closer to 80 degrees. There was almost a 30-degree difference between the direct sun and beneath the sun shelter. Extremely effective. But what about bringing this to the beach? That's where this really starts to shine. And so my son carrying this in, you can see it's a little bit big for him, but not a big deal. He's only 9 years old, doing his best, and he could carry this in with ease. Now you'll notice here a slightly different setup. This particular model here in the color teal. The teal, very nice, has a nice pop to it. A little bit different than the periwinkle, but it looks really good sitting out on the beach. And you'll see this time leveraging the sandbags. Now, one thing that I think is interesting, this does come with a scoop, which is definitely cool and makes setup very easy. But you'll notice I went with a completely alternate design for this setup. I started pretty much straightforward, setting this up the way I did in my backyard, but I noticed that the actual shade did not provide me with a lot of surface area. So here, with an alternate design based on the angle of the sun, I actually just kind of tilted this up, and it gave me a huge shaded area. Very, very effective, a very nice shaded area, and it really cuts down on the wind. Now, ADesign does say this is good up to about 15 miles an hour of wind resistance. And, you know, for me, I feel as though, and you can see it pushes down a little bit, but not a big deal. I made some adjustments, and this stayed up perfectly fine. I found for me, this was doing a great job cutting down on the wind, and it was probably a steady, I would say 12 to 18 miles an hour. So it definitely fit within the 15 mile an hour parameters. It cut down on the sun, cut down on the wind, and it was extremely effective. And once I got it perfectly into place with the poles in the right position, the sandbags properly positioned, there was no fear this was going to blow away. It was sturdy, it was sound, and you can see here a very effective amount of shaded area. Perfect for me, perfect for my family, and for plenty of people, giving us a good, comfortable place to sit and get out of the sun's rays. And so overall, the ADesign sun shelter, very nice. I can say I greatly like it. So anywhere from the periwinkle blue to the teal, the alternate setups, the ability to use this in many situations, not just at home, but also at the beach, provide some shelter, provide some cover, cut down on the wind, absolutely great. And if there's one thing that I've already said, and it is definitely the truth, I really hate sitting and baking in the sun. So having a nice quality and refined shelter with the ability to set it up in a number of different ways, great options, great quality, very nice. I do have to say I am a big fan. So to the people at ADesign, very nicely done. So all right guys, there you have it. A look at these ADesign sun shelters. Absolutely awesome. I like it. Very simple in concept, yet at the same time extremely flexible. Not only good at cutting down on the sun, and you could see it made a significant difference in the temperature, but also cutting down on the wind. Now the thing that I like about this over other solutions, and there's a ton of them out there, it's flexible. It's versatile. You can set this up in a number of different ways, and it comes with everything you need. That is the thing that I like the most. And the second is, it's fairly compact given the huge amount of area you can actually protect. And especially if you're clever in your setup, you can really make this work to your advantage. Now, if there is a downside to anything, it's just maybe a touch short for somebody who's going to be taller when you set it in the fully vertical position. For me, at over 6 feet tall, yes, I need to duck under it. Yes, I need to walk under it, but not a big deal. And there would be some things that you could certainly do to help the situation if you really needed to. So for me, it's really not a big deal. The flexibility and the versatility and the quality that you get out of this surpasses any of the deficiencies. Now, if there is one other consideration, it does take a good amount of area to set up. By the time you stretch out sort of all those lines and you get this sort of position the way you need, you're taking up some real estate. So you really do need to think about where you're setting this up, who you're around, and who might be impacted by your setup. And when you're on a super crowded beach, that might be an issue. For me, in the time that I went, it wasn't. For the most part, where I go, I can usually spread out enough where it's not going to be a big deal. So it's just a consideration, not a deal breaker, but it is something that you might want to think about. And the other thing I think is fantastic about this, not only can you set this up with one, but you could set up many. You could connect a bunch of these over a given area, set it up like a little grid, and at that point you would have fantastic coverage. Now, keep in mind, again, this is not going to help you in the rain. There is no sort of like water resistant value to this. So this is simply sun and wind. That's about it. So when it comes to needing a shelter that might have water resistance, that would be a completely different product. But for what this is and what it does, I can say I definitely like it. So again, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at ADesign for providing this for review. And for the rest of you, if you like this content, do me a favor, take a look at my Outer Limitless 2 channel, which is more on the tactical and firearm side of things. At this point, that channel is growing quickly. I have a ton of videos up there. So if you like what you see here on Outer Limitless, do me a favor and check me out on Outer Limitless 2. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.